imagine, if you will, actually, when you first learn to drive a bus, my friend told me, okay, you think you're in control of this bus, and you are in control of it. You're going along London, and this is your first day out, and people are waving at you, you're going, you know, you're driving along, and you just forget that you've got to pick people up. And you don't know, where do you stop? Where is your bus stop? And where is the next guy? You can stop at the wrong stop. And my friend said he regularly used to take the wrong route. He just career off, and then to find your way back onto your route is not easy. You know, you think that people, oh, well, he's a bus driver, he knows his way to Holloway. He doesn't know a damn thing, you know. Where is Holloway, you know? And so it's a vastly more complex job than it seems. At least initially, obviously, you do get used to it, but it's a tough old job. What I'm going to do is read you a section from the book, which kind of isn't any just one chapter. It's sections from different chapters cobbled together into a narrative so that it will make sense to you. And I'm going to start off with him actually learning to drive the bus. Now I want you all to actually picture yourself, because this is a guy like us. I want you to imagine you are put in a double-decker bus and you've got to drive it through London. It's like that. Because people do this job. They're not sort of like effigies. We just see them as effigies doing that. But they're like human beings doing this ridiculously stressful job, actually. Especially if you're a sensitive soul. This one's called, this actual section is called Turning Circles. So he's got the job. This is not the beginning of the book, but it's sort of, you know, near the beginning. Turning Circles. Entering the training compound, I almost laugh at the double-decker beast I'm introduced to. Everything about it terrifies me. Its size terrifies. Its smell terrifies. Its overwhelming colour terrifies. Reddest of reds. The colour of blood, of rage, of blind passion. Above all, its purpose terrifies. Surely I can't drive this. No. It answers with a glint in its headlights. It is I who will drive you. This is difficult to refute. Indeed, it is all too easy to see how the bus will carry me away. I will be a uniformed Jonah in an automotive whale. But surely they're not expecting us to get in the bus on the first day. Wrong. Locked in the bus with the instructor, a man who, sinisterly enough, likes to be called Big Len, I realise that claustrophobia is not just physical. You can feel claustrophobic in someone else's presence, the rigid confines of whose personality enclose you in a terrifyingly small space, starving you of breath and vision. In this way, people can sentence you to imprisonment with their view of you, of the world. Such a man is Big Len. It is not the mingling of his cheap aftershave and stale breath that constrict me. Rather it is the fact that here is a fellow convict in the prison of circumstance in whom I cannot confide one iota of angst, since he refuses even to realise he's in jail. Indeed, he loves serving a life sentence. Today, not wholly without irony, he is teaching me to go round in circles. You see those traffic cones up ahead? They're not traffic cones, are they? Big Len is evidently a great fan of the rhetorical question. Aren't they? No, they're not. They're people. In fact, it's a bus stop full of people queuing for the bus behind you. Don't start running, turning left hand down until your bus is at least halfway past it. Otherwise you'll hit the cones, and when you hit the cones, you won't just be knocking down cones, will you? No, I will be knocking down a bus queue. We get the point. Which is not to say we can manoeuvre the bus equally easily. There. Now the back end of your bus has just clipped 3 cones, and what have you done? You killed 15 people, haven't you? I have. And how do you feel about that? Surprisingly okay, actually. As I see the cone people sprawling fatally injured across the tarmac, I realise how disconnected I am with my current circumstance. And those cone people probably had it coming anyway. Who knows what they get up to in their private lives? No, 2 or 3 cone people, more or less, will not adversely affect the progress of our beleaguered species. Then the instructor's voice breaks back into my Hitlerian worldview. I'll tell you how you feel. You feel devastated. You go home, but you cannot sleep. They tell you it was just an accident, but you cannot forgive yourself. One small mistake, one small error of judgment, and you've not only killed 15 people at a bus stop, you've affected the lives of all their relations. All those children you've left parentless, all those mums and dads whose kids you've just run over. For that you will never be able to forgive yourself, will you? No, I will not. Suddenly, I have a profound respect for cone people the world over. These little orange-skinned, pointy-headed souls who have revealed my closet racism, I now embrace with a contrition and compunction worthy of an eremite experiencing an epiphany. This is what driving a bus is all about, sermonises the instructor. You're not just delivering people to their destinations, you're their guardian, the custodian of their safety. While they're on board your bus, you are responsible for their lives or deaths. Suddenly I see that I am no longer a trainee bus driver, learning how to transport passengers from A to B, but a Charon, ferrying the souls of the dead to their appropriate destinations in the underworld of circumstance. No way did it state this on the job spec. At no point did I see the requirement must be prepared to assume the mythical proportions of a minor classical icon serving a major pagan god. I'd like to move swiftly on to touch on the nature of the spiritual experience that compelled this young man to give up his successful life in the city and do this huge volte-face and just do this crazy job that came to hand. It's difficult to evoke the nature of a spiritual experience which is essentially wordless, beyond words. But here goes. Remember, he's on his way to work. He's just Joe Average, sort of. And this chapter's called Phenomenal Phenomena. So there I am, or suddenly am not. In Auckland Avenue, so to speak, all sense of self punctured like a child's lie, caught out by a parent's piercing stare. Suddenly I haven't an existential leg to stand on. I am identityless. What is there instead of me is a burning spectrum of colour. Green trees bleed into blue sky, lilacs fume with purple smoke, neon traffic lights ignite in fireworks sparks of red, orange and green. No object escapes. No colour is safe from my gaze. Suddenly everything falls within the purview of a quiet rapture. Take the sun. No, I mean literally, take the sun. I had no choice. What else was I to do? What with it being so ludicrously close to hand and all? If I hadn't reached up and taken it, someone else would have done, and then where would we have been? In the dark. Or down at the front desk of the local Nick, reporting the robbery of the sun from the sky to some cynically incredulous police sergeant with his finger itching on the trigger of a phone call to the men in white coats. No, better that someone with at least some communal sense took the sun and looked after it. I'll say this. I can report back that the arm of a man is combustible, but not in a bad way. In Auckland Avenue, as something we call an arm appeared to reach up to the sun and stroke its petals of flame, my limb caught fire, and I gently waved it up and down like a torch. I recall thinking, this is interesting. Let's take this further. So I put the sun down. Well, put it back up on its shelf, actually, because like a child in a toy shed, my interest in the sun was almost immediately superseded by the branch of the tree on which I had momentarily set it down. The delightful trouble was, the branch stopped being a shelf and reached its arm back out to me. an arm of impossibly resolute elegance and power. Trees are not trees. They are sculptures holding a pose for an artist. Was I then the artist, or was I the branch? Or both? Or neither? But why wouldn't the trees come alive in Auckland Avenue? For trees are locked in our view of them, stuck in the adhesive of time we immerse them in. By falling in love with trees, one liberates them, dissolves their movement from the stasis of our stare. Then they dance. They hold out their arms to waltz with us. As lovers we cannot refuse, and so, without moving, I danced with the trees in Auckland Avenue. Ah, planet Earth may be the only name we have for our madly spinning globe, but it is deceptive nonetheless. For the Earth is weightless. How easily I bore the gravity of my own footsteps, the cohesive burden of my own earth, moonwalker in my own weightless boots. What did I think was happening? I didn't think, I mean. In Auckland Avenue, thought itself disappeared into a vortex, and with it, time. Time slid off the sundial of consciousness like the melting hands of Dali's surrealist clocks. Time ceased to measure anything. Time which is, perhaps, only a compass point upon a map to draw up notions of separation. No. In Auckland Avenue, time slowed down and stopped completely, and then began to drift aimlessly. The points on time's clock become dandelion seeds in the breeze. You can blow the hours this way or that. Moments of time are seeds on the breath of a child. So, he is now forced, we move on, he is now forced to take this experience home and to try and make sense of it in communication with, obviously, his nearest and dearest first. He also tries to make it make sense to the people at the bank. There's a very bawdy character called Ronnie at the bank, for whom such an experience is the opposite of what they used to get up to, and it's a very funny bit, but I won't read it today. I thought there might be some old ladies in the audience, so it would be perhaps you're not an old lady.
We can read it then.
No, so I'm going to go back to him trying to make sense of this experience with his forbearing wife, who is called Kate. And it's called After the Event. So I walked back home along Auckland Avenue after the event. Gradually the evening shadows lengthened. Distance grew back between me and the flowers. And the trees, sorry. Flowers lost their radiance, became colourful rather than luminous, became merely pleasant again, rather than part of an electrified ambience. And the sun, the setting sun, began to float down and away like a red balloon drifting tragically out of reach. As I climbed the steps to our flat, I was, to say the very least, phantasmagorically confused. No less so was Kate, for whom my grip on reality, long since open to debate, was now legitimately an urgent question. "What do you mean you disappeared?" she inquired with a mysterious blend of dispassionate irritability. She was exhausted. Her pregnancy had been fraught with prolonged sickness, and predictably my attempt to explain Auckland Avenue was now crashing and burning in front of its first audience. What I mean is, the I we normally think of just wasn't there anymore, at least not for a while. So what was there? Everything. Insanely powerfully. Everything, right. And where were you when this happened? Now don't tell me you were everywhere. Yes, in a manner of speaking, and nowhere. It was like I died. But it didn't matter. It was the most peaceful I've ever felt. Peaceful to be dead. Kate was unimpressed with this interpretation of mortality. I persevered. Yes, time doesn't exist. Oh no, well, I think you'll find it's 6:45. Death doesn't exist, Matt. What I mean is death only exists if time exists. If time, our experience of time, ceases to exist, then we cease to exist. Time only measures finite things. Don't you see? No, I don't. Look, you're not listening, Kate. Please, if I can't make you understand, make me. I'm just saying the bank, work. I think I need to change. Matt, I'm 5 months pregnant. All I'm saying is this changes things, don't you see? At this point, I took Kate gently by the shoulders. Surely this experience was pretty straightforward. It seemed straightforward to me. That's how mad it was. Matt let me go. Kate, for Christ's sake, get off! Belatedly, idiotically, I realised how upset she was and how absurd I was to expect her to make any sense of my feeble narrative. We fell silent and surrendered to mutual incomprehension. But of course marriages change. All marriages. That's their distinguishing mark, their forte. Indeed, their speciality, and it should say so on the packet. Please be aware this marriage will change, its contents will settle, and your happiness will weigh less. Kate went to bed early that evening. On my own downstairs in the flat, I sat in the dark, both actually and metaphorically. The silence seemed peculiarly, eerily intense. I wondered if this was what deafness, blindness was like. Then it struck me, and with it a kind of fear, that I was on my own in this one. If the event in Auckland Avenue seemed to imply, no, categorically state that I wasn't who I thought I was, that the mind, life itself, didn't play by the rules I had previously respected, then did I myself have to conform to those superseded strictures? At least this sexual sophistry is my feeble excuse for lying to Kate about my late excursion that night. Despicable, no doubt, predictable, certainly, given my serious doubts about our relationship, but walking round the city that night after Auckland Avenue, I was drunk with possibilities. And then I was drunk with tequila in a city bar. Ah, what is it about one-night stands that chills one to the bone? Is lust always ultimately overridden by a desire for the intimacy of love? Is it the corpse-like contact with a stranger's skin that makes one run from the graveyard bed of lust back to the comparative warmth of hearth and home, even if the living soul that one dwells with there is not so warm as once she was? I knew Kate, whom I'd known on and off since she was 16, loved me. And I loved her, but in our affair, and separately beknownst to both of us, the time of secrets had begun. So I now move to a little bit more experience on the bus. He's now a fully fledged bus driver. The book itself deals with the horrors of learning to drive the bus. Going out, can you imagine for the first time going out onto God's good earth, driving this damn great thing? You know, we find it difficult enough to park our cars, but there you are, you've got this monster bus, he's driving it. And all sorts of terrible things happen to people at bus drivers. I mean, we think that the experience we subject them to, a polite middle class transaction, is what they receive all the time. They do not. They have the most hideous, brutal treatment. Late at night, for example, they have drunks on the train who pee, it comes down into the cabin, all this sort of stuff, you know, that's the nicest thing that happens. They have abuse, verbal abuse, that sort of stuff. This is an example of violence on the bus. He's only been driving for about 2 months. This is the last section I will read. It's called Blood. Thank you very much. Cheers. Blood. I've been driving over this bridge for a month now. From the cabin of my bus, I gain a brief panorama of London and the river. Old Father Thames, did your city flourish over the millennia in exactly the form that you foresaw? Did we, your sons and daughters? As a bus driver, I am the keeper of a lock. I regulate a flow of humanity. Passengers enter the bus like a sluice gate opened. Their slow, relentless flood swells the central aisle. But there's something more to this one on the bridge. Something more turbulent about the current of people coming on board. A group of boys are already jostling as they get on board. As a veteran of nearly 7 weeks driving experience, I feel like an old lag where youthful bad behaviour is concerned. But violence, real violence, has a distinctive quality. It rears its monstrous head with demon speed, and suddenly time moves at a different pace, simultaneously imperceptibly fast, yet also in slow motion. Lads, can you quieten down a bit? The passengers can't hear themselves speak, I announce over the PA system. Further jostling. Now some serious swearing, more than a row. Lads, I'm not moving the bus until the raised voice of real alarm has a distinct timbre to it. Pain, real pain, has its own ironically clipped staccato music. I look sharply in my mirror to see one of the boys has dropped to the floor. His assailants suddenly bolt for the door. Think quick, I could close it, lock them in. What, so they can stab the rest of us? For Christ's sake, let them go. Let them escape this minor chaos. Let them out into the greater chaos, the chaotic anonymity of the street. Rightly or wrongly, I open the doors. Several youths disperse, one laughing. A girl's scream, visceral panic rends the air. The boy is bleeding, not uncontrollably, but steadily, in a way that demands a serious response. I really hear myself asking, is there a doctor on the bus? Amazingly, there is. A young woman, surely not long out of grad school, comes down from a seat on the top floor of the bus and asks people to step aside to give the boy air. For the split second I can afford my own sense of decency, I find her very attractive. She is dark-haired, pretty, and saves people's lives. What more can one ask of one's fare-paying customers? Her cool-eyed assessment is that though the small puncture wound to his thigh does not appear life-threatening, he needs immediate ambulance attention. I stumble back to my cabin and issue a code red. A code red as an emergency call through to the main London control centre. They then contact the nearest hospital and get assistance. As the bus driver, you have to ask the remaining passengers to get off and catch the next bus. Understandably, charity only extends so far. Knowing the boy isn't going to die, a different orchestra strikes up. Pain's dark music starts to be modulated by the thin violin strains of trivial moans about lateness, inconvenience, suggestions that the youth shouldn't have been on the bus in the first place. Panic over. The ambulance comes. The paramedics are like uniformed angels who descend to earth, resolve our pain, wrap it up and take it away. So they do with this soldier of the streets, taking away this mock gangster in the hood, this urban rebel against boredom, leaving me to clear up his blood as I await the police. You can lose an awful lot of blood in a very short time, as this boy has. Apparently without much of a problem, except for the one who has to clear it up. A pint, was it? I stood and looked at it. This blood, this thick red sauce, this human pomodoro, inexplicably poured over no pasta. What was I supposed to do with it? I had only a small cloth, and in a couple of seconds it had absorbed all that cloths are interested in. Cloths are part-timers, really. Not serious about the job they've been engaged to do. Cloths are clock watchers, with no sense of vocation. They do the bare minimum and then disappear. In a sense, I can see where they're coming from. I've been a cloth myself. I know what a lousy job it is to clear up other people's shit. And then, what's in it for the cloth? So now, clothless, I stared at the blood. And the blood stared back, daring me to do nothing. Blood in any quantity is warm to the touch. Too warm. As if alive. I don't want to touch it, precisely because it has an uncanny life of its own, as if at any moment it might rear up, as if it wanted to get back into the body that had accidentally spilled it, wanted to get home. Blood outside the body is an orphan. It cries for its parent. I could put my arm around it, but I could not reunite them, these closest of relations, but body and blood. Of course, the police arrived and bollocked me, politely, for interviewing with a crime scene with my cloths. Anyway, there was nothing further I could do, and the bus was now in the hands of forensics. Would I please step down? I did step down from my cabin, and suddenly, timelessly, gazed at the river again. And old Father Thames gazed back, impassively, with no tears in his eyes, having seen it all before. So I turned away and waited for another bus myself.
Is he going to get a free copy?
How long did it take you to write, and how different did it end up from what you...
That's a very good question,
foresaw
actually,
when you
because
started?
it took me about a year to write, and I would sit in my Fiat Multipla, which I've always referred to as a kind of mobile room, because I take all the seats out. It's a very square car, and I would drive it up to the top of the Downs. Last year was very sunny, and I would just write up there in this car with my PC for about 3 hours in the morning, and it took about a year to write, and it was very verbose and overwritten and too philosophical in parts, and I weeded all that out, and then I got it into a shape which I thought was great, and I took it home to Joanna, my wife, who is always very a good critic of these things. She said, I still think it's great, I love it, but you do realise, I said, it's finally finished, I cried for that! She said, oh, it's great, but you know, the last 100 pages have got to go at the beginning. So, and I kind of knew that she was right, because I'd been struggling to make it work. But the sequence of the narrative meant that I'd been struggling against the inevitable, which was that learning to drive the bus had to be much earlier on. So I then thought, okay, you bitch. And I said, you're right, you're absolutely right. And I thought, I can do this, I can do this, it'll take me a month, but I can do it. And I took it away, and actually it worked very well. And the book is twice the book it would have been had it gone off half-cocked. So yeah.
Listening to the description of the experience that your friend had, it really put me in mind of the experiences of the early mystics, or William Blake,
very
or
definitely.
you know,
Very
artists,
definitely.
and I just thought,
very
how
great
do you
experience.
feel about, you know, what sense do you make of the experience that he
I
had?
make of it precisely that.
Yeah.
I mean, William Blake famously said, you know, when he was 4, he saw. He was 4 years old, and he went to the window and went, oh my God! And literally, God. He said, God stared in at the window at me. Now, by God, he doesn't just mean this old guy on the with a beard, but actually the suddenly extraordinary, powerful reality of things, phenomena, just suddenly burst into his consciousness, like an epiphany. And I think, I mean, I've never had one of those. The nearest I get to that is the moods of quietude and metaphorical connection that I experience when I write a poem. But an outright spiritual experience, no, I've not had one of those. So I've made the best sense of it I can from supposition and, as I say, from my experience as a poet. But mystics, absolutely. That sense that the world actually at a higher level is very different from the way we live in it most of the time. And who knows what it's like? I don't know. I haven't had that experience, but I imagine, using my poetic antennae, that it's something like that. In which there's a complete connectivity, an interconnectivity, and that the sense of self is much more diffused over the phenomena there, and the relationship between the external and the internal is much more subtle. Anyway, thank you very much for being such
Yes.
I'll go sign a few books.